Today, I am going to show you how to set up styles in order to typeset text messages like these. This can be really useful if you're typesetting a fic that has inserted text messages. To do so, you go over to the Text Styles menu, which is here in my right panel. If this is not visible for you, you can access it by going up to Window, going down to Text, and making sure Text Styles is selected. Once you have the text style menu open, you can start creating text styles by clicking on an existing text style and hitting duplicate, and it will open up a new one where you can change the style name, adjust what it's based off of, and the fonts and everything like that. So I'm going to just walk you through the settings that I have on these that you can apply by duplicating and creating styles as you go. So I use 6 different styles when typesetting text messages. I have a header, that's this bar at the top here with the gray background and the bold group text or name. Then I have text 1 center, which brings the text in the center of the screen, like for times or information like someone's being added to the conversation. Then I have me and me name. These are the right side text messages. If I were to have me name, it's going to look something like that. Often you know who's the person who I am, right? The person who has the phone, you know who it is. So there won't often be a name there, but some fanfics do have the names of who's texting in both directions, or they have timestamps or something like that. And so I like to include that as a style. And then the same thing, but the opposite, them and them name. This creates the person who is sending you the texts. So let's jump in and start with the header. I'm just going to go in and hit edit, and I'm going to walk you through the different screens here. So starting with the font, I use SF Pro. It's a sans serif font because on cell phones you use sans serif fonts. You can pick a different font. You can even use a normal serif font like Garamond if you prefer. I just liked it to feel a bit more authentic, like it's your actual phone. And then I'm changing the font style to bold, specifically so that it's a bit more noticeable as the header of the group chat, and then I'm increasing the font size to 12. My normal font size is 11, so that's one size up, just to give it a little more oomph. But again, you can pick the settings that you like. Then for color, I'm changing the font color to white, so that way it'll show up against the gray background. Then I go down to under the paragraph settings, I switch to spacing, and I'm making sure that for my alignment that center is selected. I don't need anything for leading, making sure these are all set to 0. And then the spacing before and after I have set to 18 point. You can adjust this based off of your decoration. So when you set up your decoration, which I'll show next, you can choose how wide you want this bar to be. And if you make it really wide, there's possibility that the style that you use next will overlap that gray. And so this space in before and after here in this setting will prevent that from happening. So in order to make sure it applies no matter where it is on the page, I do change the use space before to always, just to make sure that it's covered and I won't have any overlap for text. Then I go down to flow options, and I keep this with the next line. So I'm increasing this, it's probably 0 on your default settings, I'm increasing it to 1, just because I don't want this to be at the end of a page. I think it would look weird. I want it to be at the start of the page or in the middle where you can actually see some of the text messages below it. These are not as important for this. You can turn them on if you like, but for the most part, these are going to be one-liners, so not an issue there for orphaning. Then I go down to decorations. This is where you make it gray. So when you first kind of join, it should probably look like this, and so you have to click it twice to enable it, and then make sure all of these are checked. All 5 of those buttons, and it'll come in with kind of 0 indents, and it kind of looks something like this, not what we're really going for. And so I'm going to turn off the stroke because I don't need the stroke for this, and I'm actually going to change this color to something a bit darker, and then I'm going to change what's relative here from text to column. This will make sure it stretches from the left and the right the entire width of the screen. Now it's kind of odd. It's very, very tight to the font here. And so I'm going to increase the top to negative 0.113, and I'm just doing this by scrolling using my mouse and scrolling, and I'm going to do the bottom to 0.1. Because they're set to descent and cap height, that's why they're different, because I want them to look even. You can pick the heights, however, that you like the best, that works for you. And if you want this to not go from column to column, this is where you can also adjust as needed. So you could bring that in if you wanted to. So that's the settings for your header. You can leave combine identical checked here. This just means if you have multiple lines on your header that the decoration in the background will appear as one unit. This will be different when we get into the actual text messages, which I'm going to move to next. So next up is the center. So for this one, you would just right click on your header and again hit duplicate, and it will create a new one with the header as your kind of default settings. So then I'm going to hop in to center, and as you go through, you can update the style name and lower your font back down to size 11 and change the font style to no change. And then pop down into color and change it from most likely white. If you're basing it off of the header text, change that to black. And in font, some people do like to do italics here, so you could change that to italics. I like it as normal font. I think it's easier to read. And so then I'm going to pop down to spacing again. And for these, I'm going to lower the space before and after down to 12 point, just because it's a little bit smaller and I don't have a decoration behind it, so it doesn't need to be as wide. And making sure it's again centered and that there's no change or space before. And then I'm going to go down to flow options. That's the next section we're changing. And so for this one, I'm going to have nothing, keep with next. And again, this line is usually only a single line, so I don't really need to have any of these checked, but my default is to prevent orphaned lines. But this only applies when you're doing paragraphs, so it won't come up in this style. And then finally, you want to make sure decorations are off for this. You can just uncheck that or leave it as like a straight line. Either way, that works. And that is how you create the center. Now moving down into the me's. So I will hop into this one next. So this one, like I said, it doesn't get used as often because usually you know who me is in the text. You know whose point of view you're reading from. But it is nice to have nonetheless. And it's going to be, once you create this one, you can just duplicate it to create the them, and so that helps a lot. So again, I'm keeping the font as SF Pro. I'm keeping it as size 11 with no font style applied. I'm keeping it as black font. And then I'm going to hop into spacing. Now this is where we're going to change it. I like to have this look a little more narrow, like it is on a phone. So I'm going to make sure that my alignment is set to right because I am me in this scenario. I want this to be on the right side of the screen, like I would on a phone. And I'm changing this so there's 0 left indent. However, there is a right indent of 0.25 inches. That brings it off of the edge, and then same with the first line and the outline. So this just keeps it off of the right side so that it can be in alignment with the text below it, with the text bubbles below it. And then I'm creating a space after, that's 5 points. Let me add in, so if I'm adding the name and I'm calling it me name and I'm editing it, if I were to increase the space after here, you can see that it adds a larger gap between this and the bubble. I like 5 point, I think that's good with the fonts, but depending on the font you use, you might have to increase or decrease that to your preference. So then after you have the settings set up for spacing, you go down to flow options. And this one you definitely want to make sure you have the next one line selected. This way it will keep the name with the text bubble. Otherwise it looks kind of weird if at the bottom of your page there's a name and the text bubble is on the next page. So that's how I keep those together. And then that's it for the me name. You're going to do this again for them name and just swap your spacing. But first we're going to move on to the me's. So again, we're duplicating me name. You're going to start off with just duplicating me name and then renaming it to your actual text bubbles. So again, this is keeping the font style the same, the font family the same, keeping my colors now back to white. So I'm changing it from black to white because I'm going to put a darker color bubble in the background. Then I hop down to spacing, and again, this time I do have a left indent of about 1 inch. You can adjust this with what you like, but when you have something that's really long, you don't want the text bubble to stretch from all the way over here to over here. That doesn't look exactly right. You want it to kind of have this first text, how it kind of ends. That's about 1 inch off. So that's what I do. I set it to 1 inch, and that's like a good, clearly goes back and forth. It feels like it's on opposite sides. So that's how you adjust that, by making sure you have a right alignment selected, left indent of 1 inch, your right indent of 0.25, and then again you repeat that for the first line and outdent and last line outdent, just so that it all stays smooth and even. And then you can adjust the space before and after. In this case, you are going to make sure you want to have different spaces between the same styles and for the space after. When you have the space after set to 14, this means that when you're hopping back and forth between different styles, you have a little bit more space, which I think flows better. But when I'm between the same style and it's just the same text, multiple texts sent in a row, don't have that big of a space between the bubbles. So I check this box and I decrease it to 11.5. Again, I'm making sure to always use the space before. Going down to flow options, this is where you're going to make sure that you have keep paragraph together checked. You don't want to have a text message be split just because you're at the end of the page. That would look really funny, and it's going to mess with your decorations. So keep paragraph together. It will mean that your text message is going to move to the next page, but it will look better. So you can adjust this based on how you feel if you want. If you don't like that big space at the end of the page, you could split up the text message by hitting the enter key, and that would help. But you want to make sure that the paragraphs are not being cut halfway through, as it will look very weird. And finally, the decorations. Again, this is going to make things look a lot nicer. So I'm going to uncheck this so that I can walk you through how I set this up. So first you enable it and make sure you have all of these checked. Then I'm going to go in and I'm going to adjust the color I want for stroke and also for the fill. And as you can see right now, it's just a big rectangular box. That doesn't look very good. So this is where you're going to make sure that combine identical is not checked. This now makes sure you'll have separate bubbles. Clicking this button right here, this like long line with 1 point, will allow you to change your stroke. So I was using 8.8 as my stroke, and I had it specifically set to the round join. This gives me that bubble-like appearance that I like. Now, one of the things to note when you're setting this up, when you have your indents, it's relative to the cap height and to the descent. So that means that it's going to look like it's thicker on the bottom than the top. So to adjust that, I just like to expand my top a bit. So I'm just going to do that till right there, 0.03 inches. And to me, that looks even. But feel free to adjust what you like there based on your own preference. And that gives me the bubble. That gives me the text bubble using this decoration. And so I'm going to hit OK. And then you walk through the exact same thing, but on this other side. So I'm going to click Me Name. And I'm going to duplicate this, and I'll actually walk you through how I do this. So I already have one set up, and I want to do the left side. So I'm going to change this to Them Name. And I'm going to go to the spacing section. And this is where I'm going to be swapping this from left to right, or right to left, I mean, because I'm now writing the them. And I'm going to change this from a right indent of 0.25 to a left indent, and the right indent now to 0. And so now it will indent in on that side, and everything else is set up exactly how I like it. I don't have to do anything else but hit OK. So now I want to create the them bubbles. I'm going to just start with the me, hit duplicate, and change this to them. And I'm on text number 5. And in the spacing area, this is going to have to be swapped around. So I'm going to change from right to left for alignment. And I'm going to be changing this, so instead of 1.25, 1.25, it goes 0.251, 0.251. So I'm going to take this and do that. And put that as 1. And now I have that set the way I want it, and I'm going to keep everything else the same on this tab. But I'm going to hop down to decorations because I no longer want the background to be blue. I want it to be a gray. So I'm going to just swap the stroke and the fill color to gray, but keep everything else the same. Another thing I'm going to have to do now, because this is gray, is change the font color to black. So I'm going to go up to character and select color and decoration and change the font color back to black. Then I'm going to hit OK. So if you're wondering how to create the text message styles, this is how you do it. With these 6 styles, you can then go through and apply them very easily to your fan fiction. So I'm going to show you how to do that next. Here I've pasted in part of Please Leave Me a Message by Subcorax from AO3, and I'm going to apply my text message styles to the text for easy typesetting. I'm going to show you how to do this manually, and then with another fic I'll show you how you can utilize the Find and Replace menu for your advantage. So starting off, I'm just going to be using the arrow keys on my keyboard and clicking the styles over here on the left. If you want, you can also apply by going into the edit menu, into style, shortcuts, which can make it easier and faster for you to apply and work for your workflow. Going manually though, you just click down on your down arrows and you can go through and start applying. And at the end of the day, you end up with a really nice looking typeset. Pretty easy, just applying styles as you go. One thing to note that you may have noticed is when you apply decorations to styles, you end up with this. The decorations kind of ignore your margins. And so if you have certain margins and style set up, you might end up with an issue here where it's like too tall or it goes past the end of the margin. So one of the habits I just get into is adjusting my master pages so that it comes off the edge just a little bit. Then when I'm in here, I don't have that issue anymore. And that's how you apply your text message styles. So next I'll show you how to do it using Find and Replace to make your flow a little bit easier. Text messages are going to be formatted differently depending on the fanfic and how the author decides to lay it out. This is the Jane Project by Amy19 on AO3. They typeset it by doing Carmichael with a colon followed by a space, then the contents of the text. I want to transform this from this format into one that uses text message bubbles like you would be on a cell phone. So in order to do that, you want to make sure that you have the Find and Replace menu open. You can access that by going to Window and clicking Find and Replace, which should make sure it should appear. I'm going to start with just copying Carmichael with the space and dropping it into both the Find and Replace. Under Replace, I'm going to backspace that space, and I'm going to insert special characters and do paragraph break. And then in the formatting gear associated with Replace With, I'm going to go down to paragraph style and click them. That's the bubble we want. I'm going to find and I'm going to hit Replace All. Then I'm going to go back to the Replace field, get rid of that paragraph, get rid of that space in the Find field, and then again in the gear associated with Replace With, I'm going to change it to them name. I'm hitting Find and I'm replacing all. And with that 2 seconds, I have applied these styles to all of the Carmichaels within this fic. And I'm going to just do that over and over again for each of the paragraphs, copying it in, deleting that space, adding the special character paragraph break, going to the gear and changing it to text 5 them, hitting Find, replacing all, deleting the paragraph and the space, changing it back to the name, again hitting Find and Replace All. And as you do this, it gets pretty fast. You start getting kind of used to the pattern, but it just takes these two different find and replaces, and you can do this for the entire fic. And you still have to do cleanup afterwards. So one of the things you can notice is there are duplicates. So when you're texting somebody, you don't see their name over and over and over again, right? It just looks like the bubbles are grouped together and you see the name at the beginning. So you will still have to manually go through and delete these extras so they get kind of close, so the text bubbles get close together. So there is still manual work that you have to do for this, but it does make things a lot faster. You also have to go through and do the headers, the centers, you know, people removing or staying in the group text. So you do still have to go through and do that, clean up the duplicates. So it's not, you know, the easiest, but it definitely makes it a lot faster when you do find and replace, because I've already done 3-4 characters by doing this, and it's just makes things go a lot faster. The reason why you do find them as the first replace all, though, is because the text messages that come through are obviously unique, but the names are the same. And so when you apply them first, it applies to both the text message and the name. And then afterwards, you can replace it with the correct, you can replace the searchable, repeatable name and correct it that way. One thing to keep an eye out for is the occasional spelling, right? It's obviously find and replace, which means it has to be exact and no one's perfect. So you might be running through this and seeing that you missed one because instead of a colon, it was a semicolon or something like that. Or they spelled Connors with an E instead of an O. Little things like that do come up. So you do still have to go through afterwards and just kind of review and apply it. But if you do it this way, it does make things go a lot faster. And you have your text, your fic basically typeset. You just have to do cleanup now. So that does make things go a lot faster. So that's how you can easily typeset in bulk for fics that are formatted like that. And you can do this in some other cases as well. It can be applied in different ways depending on how the formatting is, but it does make it go a lot easier, and I hope you found it helpful.